The rain had been falling for hours, heavy and restless, like the sky was punishing the earth for something it couldn't forgive. The fields behind my small farmhouse had turned into rivers of mud, and the wind howled through the gaps in the old wooden fences. I had just finished bolting the last window shut when I heard it, a faint, muffled thump from outside. At first, I thought it was just a loose shutter or maybe a branch falling under the storm's weight. But then I heard it again, closer this time, a soft, metallic clink, like metal brushing against wood. I froze. My fingers tightened around the candle holder in my hand, the flame flickering nervously as if it too sensed danger. For a long moment I stood still, listening. Then another sound, a weak cough, coming from the direction of the old shed behind the house. The shed had been there long before I moved in. It was small, half-collapsed, filled with broken tools, rusted nails, and the smell of dust and oil. I hadn't stepped inside in months. But now, as lightning flashed across the sky, I saw something. A quick movement, a shadow ducking inside. My heart started pounding so loud I could feel it in my throat. I grabbed my raincoat and a lantern, pulled on my boots, and stepped out into the storm. The rain hit my face like needles, and the wind tugged at my coat, but I kept walking, one slow step at a time. The shed door was slightly open, creaking as the wind pushed it back and forth. I hesitated at the entrance, holding my breath. The lantern's glow barely reached the corners of the room. Then I saw him, a man, slumped against the far wall, drenched, shivering, covered in mud. His uniform was torn and dark with blood. His boots were caked with dirt, his face pale and drawn. A soldier, for a second I didn't move. His eyes were half open, unfocused, but when the light touched him, he flinched and reached for something inside his jacket. I gasped and took a step back. "Please," he said weakly, his voice hoarse and trembling. "Don't be afraid. I didn't know what to do." The war had ended months ago, but stories still spread, of lost soldiers, deserters, spies. My first instinct was to run back and call someone, anyone. But there was something in his voice, something fragile. Not the voice of a threat, but of someone who had been running for far too long. He tried to stand but stumbled, falling against the wall. I rushed forward before I could stop myself. "You're hurt," I said quietly. "Sit down. Don't move." His lips curved into a faint, exhausted smile. "You shouldn't help me," he whispered. "It's dangerous for you." I ignored him. I went back to the house, grabbed my old first aid box, a towel, and a flask of water. When I returned, he was still there, eyes half closed, his breath shallow. I knelt beside him and saw the wound clearly now, a deep cut along his arm and another on his side, dried blood staining his uniform. He winced as I cleaned the wound, but didn't speak. Outside, thunder rolled like distant artillery. Inside, the only sounds were his uneven breathing and the steady patter of rain on the tin roof. When I finally wrapped his arm with a bandage, he looked at me again. His eyes were blue, not bright, but the kind that had seen too much. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. "Because you're human," I said softly. "And you need it." He didn't reply. He just stared at me, like he was trying to remember what kindness felt like. I offered him the flask, and he drank slowly, every swallow seeming to cost him effort. I asked for his name. He hesitated for a long time before answering. "Evan," he said finally. "Private Evan Carter." Something in the way he said it, low, almost ashamed, made my heart ache. I wanted to ask more, but I could see how tired he was. His eyelids were already drooping, and his head leaned back against the wall. "You should rest," I said quietly. He nodded, too weak to argue. That night, I sat on an overturned crate beside him, watching him breathe. I couldn't explain the feeling that had settled in my chest, a mix of fear and compassion, curiosity and sadness. The war had taken so many things, and I had thought it was finally over. But now, sitting beside this wounded stranger, I realized it wasn't over for everyone. At some point, I must have dozed off, because when I opened my eyes again, the rain had stopped. The first light of dawn was creeping through the cracks in the walls. Evan was awake, staring at the door like he expected someone to burst through at any second. Did you sleep? I asked quietly. He shook his head. Couldn't. I keep hearing things. Dreams? Memories. He turned to look at me. I didn't mean to come here. I was just looking for somewhere to hide until the storm passed. I'll leave soon, I promise. I studied him for a moment, his trembling hands, the exhaustion carved into every line of his face. You're not going anywhere until you can walk properly, I said firmly. If anyone asks, I'll say I haven't seen anyone. He looked at me like he wanted to argue, but then his shoulders sagged. You're too kind, he murmured. That's a dangerous thing these days, I smiled faintly. So I've been told. For the next hour, we sat in silence. The world outside was waking up. Birds calling, wind easing, puddles glinting with light. The war might have ended, but for both of us, something new had just begun. Something quiet, uncertain, and fragile. When I finally stood to leave, he stopped me. Miss, he said, why did you help me? You don't even know who I am. I hesitated at the door, looking back at him. Maybe I don't need to, I said. Sometimes it's enough to know someone needed saving. He didn't reply. But when I walked away, I could feel his eyes following me. Not out of fear, but something else. Gratitude. As I stepped back into the sunlight, I knew my life had changed the moment I opened that shed door. I just didn't know how much yet. The next few days passed like a strange dream, part fear, part compassion. The shed became more than an old shelter. It became a secret, one that weighed on me with every sunrise. I brought food quietly each morning, bread, soup, sometimes warm tea when I could spare it. Evan would thank me each time softly, always with the same distant eyes. He never ate much, but he always said, "Thank you," as if the words themselves were keeping him alive. His wounds began to heal slowly. I cleaned and changed the bandages, and though he winced, he never complained. Sometimes he would sit by the small window of the shed, staring at the fields like a man seeing the world for the first time. It's so quiet here, he said once. Too quiet. It doesn't feel real. I knew what he meant. The war had left a silence across the land. Not peaceful, but heavy. The kind of silence that comes after too many cries have faded. I asked him once where he had come from, what had happened. He didn't answer at first, only clenched his jaw and looked away. But that night, when the crickets sang outside and the world seemed almost gentle again, he began to speak. I was part of the 18th Infantry, he said slowly, voice low. We were told to hold a bridge near the border. It was supposed to be easy, but it wasn't. He paused, his eyes unfocused. They surrounded us. There was shouting, smoke, confusion. My best friend, Liam, he was hit right beside me. I tried to drag him, but his voice broke off. When I woke up, the bridge was gone. The ground was burning. I don't even know who made it out. I didn't know what to say. His pain filled the room like smoke, silent but choking. I just reached out and placed my hand over his gently. You don't have to tell me everything, I whispered. He nodded, grateful for the silence that followed. But from that night, something changed. He began to talk more, not about the war, but about small things, his village, the sea he missed, his mother's garden. Sometimes when he smiled, I could almost see the boy he used to be before the uniform. Still, there was fear beneath everything. I noticed how he tensed whenever he heard footsteps on the road or a cart passing by. Once, when 2 officers rode past the field, he ducked down behind the wall, trembling. They're still looking, he murmured. For you? I asked quietly. For anyone who ran, he said. They call us deserters. But we didn't run from courage. We ran from madness. His words haunted me for days. Each night, when I lay in bed, I wondered if I had done the right thing. If someone discovered him, they'd think I was helping an enemy. But every time I saw him, weak yet still trying to smile, I knew I couldn't turn him in. One morning, I woke to the sound of knocking. Sharp, hurried, official. My heart leapt to my throat. I quickly opened the door to find 2 men in uniform standing on my porch. Their boots were muddy, their faces grim. Ma'am, one said curtly, we're conducting a search. Reports say a soldier may be hiding in this area. I tried to keep my voice steady. A soldier here? No, I haven't seen anyone. Just me and my farm. The taller officer looked past me into the hallway. Mind if we take a look around? Every nerve in my body screamed, but I forced a calm nod. Of course. They walked through the house, boots thudding on the floorboards. I followed them, pretending to tidy up, though my hands shook so hard the teacups rattled. The shed door was visible from the kitchen window, half hidden behind the trees. I prayed silently that Evan had stayed quiet. The officers checked every room, even the cellar. When they finished, the taller one adjusted his gloves. If you see or hear anything unusual, report it immediately, he said. There are still fugitives moving through this area. I understand, I murmured. When they left, I didn't breathe until their horses were far down the road. Then I ran, across the muddy yard, through the wet grass to the shed. I opened the door, and there he was, hidden behind an old crate, eyes wide and terrified. They were here, I whispered. You can't stay much longer. He looked at me with a kind of sadness that felt heavier than fear. I know, he said, but I don't have anywhere else to go. I sank down beside him, my pulse still racing. Then we'll find somewhere, I said. There's a forest north of here, maybe a cabin or cave. He shook his head. You've done enough. I can't put you in danger. Evan, if they find you out there, I'd rather they find me than hurt you. His words stopped me cold. He looked straight at me then, eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before, a quiet, selfless sorrow. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The wind slipped through the cracks in the wood, whispering like an unseen ghost. Finally, I said softly, You don't get to decide who I care about. He blinked, surprised. And then, for the first time since I'd met him, he laughed, a short, breathless laugh that broke into a cough. But there was warmth in it, the kind that made my chest ache. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by my window, staring at the moonlit fields, wondering how long this fragile secret could last. Every creak outside made my heart jump. I thought of the officers, the war, the lies I was now telling. All for a man I had known less than a week. But I also thought of his eyes, the way he looked at the morning light, like he'd forgotten what peace felt like, and I knew I'd do it all again. Days passed. His strength returned bit by bit. He even helped me mend a broken fence one afternoon, his movements slow but steady. Watching him work in the soft sunlight, I realized how easy it had become to forget he was a fugitive. For a few minutes, it felt like any ordinary day, two people side by side, fixing what life had broken. But peace never lasts. That evening, as we shared a quiet meal in the shed, we heard it again. Voices in the distance. Not one or two, but several, rough and urgent. Searchers. Evan's eyes met mine. He didn't have to say a word. We both knew what it meant. Go, I whispered. Out the back. Through the fields. He grabbed his jacket, still stiff with dried blood, and hesitated. What about you? I'll say I was alone, just go. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, with a look that said everything words couldn't, he reached out and touched my hand, brief but trembling. Thank you, he said quietly, for seeing me when no one else would. And then he was gone, slipping into the rain-soaked night, swallowed by the darkness. I stood there long after he disappeared, my heart pounding with fear and something I couldn't name. When the soldiers arrived minutes later, I met them at the door, calm, collected, lying through my teeth. No one's here, I said. I haven't seen a soul. They searched again, this time harsher, tearing through the shed, overturning crates. But they found nothing. By the time they left, the sky was breaking into pale dawn. I closed the door, my hands trembling, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. I didn't know if Evan had made it far, or if he was still out there, running through the mist. All I knew was that the shed felt painfully empty. And so did I. After Evan disappeared into the night, the days that followed felt hollow, like the world had lost its sound. The farm was the same, the sky was the same, but something inside me had changed. The shed that once held danger now held silence, and every time I walked past it, I could still feel his presence, the faint echo of his voice, the warmth of his eyes in the dim lantern light. For weeks I lived half in fear, half in hope. Fear that the officers would return. Hope that Evan might. I told myself he was safe, that he'd found shelter, that maybe one day I'd see him walk through the gate again, smiling, whole. But as the nights grew colder and the trees began to lose their leaves, that hope started to fade. Then, one gray morning, I found something. It was wedged between the loose boards of the shed door, a small scrap of folded paper, damp from the fog. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, written in small, careful handwriting, were just a few lines. I'm alive. Don't look for me. You saved me once. That's more than anyone ever did. If the world ever finds peace again, I'll come back. I pressed the note to my chest, the tears coming before I could stop them. He was alive. Somewhere, somehow, he was still breathing. That was enough to keep me going. Months passed. The war's echo slowly began to fade from the news, but not from the people. Families still waited for sons who would never return. The village tried to rebuild what was lost. Yet some wounds didn't heal. They simply hid beneath the surface, like scars beneath sleeves. I went on with my days, tending to the fields, repairing fences, baking bread for the market, all the things that made life look ordinary. But deep inside, I carried a secret warmth, a memory that lived between one heartbeat and the next. And then, one winter evening, everything changed again. It was snowing hard that night, the wind sharp enough to cut through wool. I was sitting by the fire, mending an old scarf, when a knock echoed through the quiet. It wasn't the sharp official kind I'd heard before. It was soft, almost hesitant. My heart stopped. I opened the door slowly. There he was. Evan stood in the snow, his hair longer, his face thinner, but his eyes, those deep, tired eyes, were still the same. His uniform was gone. Instead, he wore an old gray coat torn at the edges. His hands were trembling, and his breath rose in pale clouds. Evan, my voice broke before I could say more. He smiled faintly, that same crooked smile I'd once thought I'd never see again. You said not to decide who you care about, he whispered. So I came back. For a moment, I couldn't move. Then I stepped forward and threw my arms around him. He was cold, so cold, but real, solid, alive. The snow kept falling around us, quiet and endless. Inside, by the firelight, he told me his story. After he'd fled that night, he'd followed the river north, sleeping in barns, eating whatever he could find. He'd joined a group of survivors, men who'd once been soldiers but now just wanted to live. They moved from town to town, unseen, unwanted, until finally the patrols stopped. When it was safe enough, I came back, he said softly. I didn't know if you'd still be here. I smiled through tears. I never left. He stayed that night in the house, not the shed. For the first time, he slept in a real bed, under a real roof. I watched him from the doorway as he drifted off, the firelight painting his face in soft gold. He looked peaceful, something I had never seen in him before. In the morning, he helped me gather wood, his movements slow but steady. It was as if the weight of the world had finally loosened its grip on him. The farm felt alive again, not because of what we said, but because of the quiet that existed between us. As days turned into weeks, Evan began to heal not just in body, but in spirit. He laughed more, worked beside me, even repaired the roof of the shed that had once been his hiding place. Sometimes, when the sun set and the sky turned the color of amber and ash, we'd sit together on the porch in silence, the world around us still and calm. But peace, as I had learned, is fragile. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was sealed with the official mark of the army. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. To all residents in the northern provinces, former soldiers of the 18th Infantry have been granted full pardon. Survivors are to report to the capital for registry and reintegration. My hands trembled. Evan read it over my shoulder, silent. When I turned to him, he looked both relieved and uncertain. "You're free," I said softly. He nodded slowly. "Free," he repeated as if testing the word. "But what does that mean, really? I don't know where to go." "Then stay," I said without hesitation. "Stay here." He smiled, the kind of smile that carries both love and sorrow. "You've already given me too much," he murmured, but he stayed. Winter melted into spring, and life began to bloom again. The fields green, the river thawing, the sound of laughter returning to the village. Evan helped rebuild the barn, taught the children how to mend tools, and though people whispered about the stranger living on my farm, I didn't care. For a while, it felt like the world had forgiven us. Then, one morning I woke to find him gone. No note, no sign, nothing but the faint imprint of his boots leading toward the road. My chest felt hollow, like someone had pulled the breath from it. Days passed, then weeks. The world went on, but I couldn't. And then, a letter arrived. The envelope was worn, the ink faint. My name written in his hand. I opened it slowly, my eyes already burning. "My dearest, I left because I could not bear to let my past endanger your peace. The Army's pardon does not erase what I've done, or what I've seen. But you gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. A reason to live without hate. I'm going south to join the rebuilding efforts. If the world is kind, maybe one day our paths will cross again. Until then, know this. You were my shelter, my light, and my home. Evan." By the time I finished reading, the ink had blurred with my tears. I pressed the letter to my heart and closed my eyes. The wind moved softly through the open window, like his voice whispering one last goodbye. Years have passed since then. The shed still stands, though time has worn it down. I keep it as it was, untouched, sacred. Some nights, when the rain begins to fall and the wind howls across the fields, I sit by the window and listen. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I can still hear his voice, faint, warm, alive in the shadows. They say every war leaves behind ghosts. Maybe they're right. But some ghosts aren't meant to haunt us. They're meant to remind us that we once loved, once cared, once chose kindness even when it was dangerous. Evan was one of those ghosts, and though he never came back, he never truly left. Because somewhere in the quiet between heartbeats, he's still there. The soldier who hid in my shed, and the man who taught me what courage really means.